What do you have when the people don't trust the media, government, or medical industry, and for good reason, because they objectively lie to them, lie to their face, get caught in lies, and sometimes for financial interests, where you have got the president at the time, Rachel Maddow, Walensky, who I think is the head of the CDC, repeatedly make statements that they have no basis to make, and were known lies at the time. It's like, well, that's called a low trust society, and it's not a great place to be, especially in times of emergencies. So Disney's fake news media is not selling, and their layoffs impact 6% of staff. ABC News and Axe is the 538 political polling site, which I think is the more interesting issues. So they're, I guess Disney's shifting into sports, but there's a couple of interesting points with these Disney subsidiaries. One's called 538 and the other is ABC, and their audiences are tuning out. So to set the stage, Disney's a $150 billion company and has bought out or started other companies like Marvel, you're familiar with ABC, or here 538 with Nate Silver's company. And Disney is controlled by blood-sucking parasites that worship Moloch. They're globalists, which is an actual religion. It's not just a hyperbolic turn of phrase, or it's as similar to, close enough to a religion to kind of meet a lot of the elements. But I think it meets the elements of the religion. In their case, their master is Satan. And yes, it sounds crazy until you start watching their movies and their animations. Eventually, you'll see it. It's just like seeing, They Live repeatedly. This means that they make diverse, feminist, blonde man bad type of movies to push a globalist, anti-white, anti-nation, anti-Christian narrative, even if it costs them money. Even their 100-year anniversary movie, it was called Wish, and it was about some vaguely brown character who has brown girl feminist magic. And of course, the antagonist is a darker brown character, nicknamed the Black-Hearted, the Evil. No, of course not. He was fair-skinned and light-eyed for some reason. And here's the middle ground. Here's the obvious, simple solution, if I can go on a tangent. If you have a mixed race characters in a show, simply make the protagonist and antagonist the same color, the same ethnicity, the same religion, so there isn't any conflict spilling over into the real world. See how easy that solution was? If you have a black protagonist, then the antagonist has to match, so there's no racial issues, especially at a time when people are really not interested in it, and objectively, they're not paying for these tickets to go watch Disney. And that the Wish, their 100-year anniversary, was a bomb, and so many Disney movies lately have been bombing. So the alternative is, if they insist on race mixing, just balance it. Well, for some movies, the bad guys are brown, some black, then Asian, Arab. Just spread it around and make it fair, which is probably triggering to them. Those are just two of the simplest solutions that would stop these kind of issues of all hatred directed against one group of people. People look like you, but that's not what Disney is concerned about. They do want to make the hatred focused on one group of people, as long as it's against you. You can make a graph of the past 50 movies and animations from Disney, and they churn out a lot a year, and show the protagonists and antagonists, and what you would see is one column was mostly light colors, and the other column is mostly dark colors. That's how on the nose it is. Then you can factor in gay and religious characters, and it's going to be exactly as you expected, which, there goes the willing suspension of disbelief. Anyway, their movies and animations have not been doing well lately, which is just delightful to watch. Most of them are barely breaking even. The last example is the race-swapped Captain America. He's like the Falcon, but he's also Captain America, and he just kind of combines his powers. I'm not exactly sure. Did they explain what happened to Chris Evans? I wasn't paying attention to the last couple Marvel movies. And then they've got the diverse vagina-powered Marvels, which was Brie Larson's sequel to Captain Marvel. Then the estrogen Madame Ovaries. Then you have the last three woke movies that all lost money. The audience is clearly telling Disney that woke doesn't sell. And if Disney keeps making woke movies, the audience is going to continue to not watch them. But that's their fictional pop culture stuff, which at one time, I got to admit, Disney used to make a lot of fun stuff. Kind of more like the 90s and earlier, maybe 2000 at the latest. Now you're just better off with sticking with old movies, even old Disney. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Say pre-1995, I think you're safe with it. But their news divisions are also not doing well, which kind of surprised me because this is across the board of the mainstream media, which is obviously left-wing. The audiences are not watching the mainstream media, except for Fox to some extent. I think everything is down, but Fox is definitely leading the way because the growing audience has turned to start watching alt media, stuff like on various platforms, even on the left and the right. You got Alex Jones and Dan Bongino and Steven Crowder and Mark Dice, and then there's the Young Turks and Sam Cedar, and there's a bunch of these just unwatchable left-wing shows that are on YouTube. So media is spreading out massively, and it's getting thinner, and this is kind of where we're getting into one of the aspects of the low-trust society. And this can be a downside because people can get isolated away from diversity of thought, of opposing views. But the upside is that there is more diversity of thought with the big if of if you balance your sources and how many people are interested in doing that versus they feel comfortable staying in an echo chamber. Where when it used to be just the mainstream media, which I was thinking back to my childhood, our childhood, because you're about the same age, is, it was a handful of channels on TV. ABC, CBS, NBC were the three main channels. And then I think was the government KQED. And then there, for us, the Bay Area, there was a local channel. I forget what it was called. I think it might have been Coffee or something. So you're talking about less than a half a dozen channels. And that was for a long time until cable came, and for a lot of part of the country, cable kind of came in the 80s. But it meant that stuff was what people were on the same page. And admittedly, yes, it was completely left-wing, globalist biased. But the advantage was with the old stuff is that people were on the same page in terms of priority of issues. And you could say, oh, did you see that news story last night in the 80s? And everyone would know what you're talking about. Because if there's some special event, the three main networks, you could click from one to the other and they'd all be showing the same thing, the same speeches by a politician if it was important, or the same news stories. Like everyone was on the same page to that extent, which also the downside meant that it was easier to subject them to propaganda, which is exactly what happened, but it was different. It was different because, like, yes, there was less feedback directly with the media, but people were on the same page, so they were able to talk amongst each other. And that was when there was a higher social cohesion in the country because the demographics were whiter. And so they were able to call out BS in the media. And because the demographics have just been destroyed, that's not possible anymore. Where the mainstream media has gone mask off with the propaganda, it's gotten so ridiculous to the point where, like I said, Biden, Walensky, and Rachel Maddow and like Don Lemon at the time during the 20 to 24, they were doing the Wu flu thing. They were making statements that were objectively not true at the time of the Wu flu to get you to manipulate your behavior. And thankfully for those of us stayed pure blood, it didn't work. But the interesting thing that's happening in this Trump second term, which is derangement syndrome 2.0, is that the mainstream media is suffering some firings of big names and a shrinking audience because their biased coverage is so obviously, the media is just lying to people's faces, and it's so ridiculous that the audience is leaving the mainstream at least to go to alternative sources. And I'm sure the Young Turks is just as stupid, but at least it's something different. So you had a sycophantic media that soft-pedaled Biden and Kamala for 4 years. And even when Trump was out of office, they focused on Trump. It's like, you got Biden in office, Kamala in office. Shouldn't you be focusing on those people? And like, well, we're left-wing media, and any focus on Biden would make them look bad. And same for Kamala, to the point where even Saturday Night Live and those kind of like TV shows were still focused on the right wing. And they just like obviously became, bizarrely partisan. People started to understand that something was wrong with the media, and the Trump obsession was getting old. People had TDS for his first 4 years, and they had the Biden disaster, so they're kind of burned out on hearing this insane globalist media freak out over Trump, and it's been how many years now? To the point where the Dems won't stand for Lake and Riley's parents or for a kid with cancer. And yes, those are obviously manipulative setup scenes where they're using this for, political posturing. I get that, but to not stand for the victims of illegal immigrant violence, that's insanely bad optics. And, a 13-year-old kid with cancer, you just have to kind of go along with that. But they didn't. Instead, they were holding up little signs like, I don't know, they're triggered by Elon Musk while they're driving Teslas or something. Then some stupid news show, one of the idiot talking heads, this idiot woman, she tries to force a comparison with this cancer victim at Trump's speech to January 6th and the cops who self-deleted. Isn't it kind of weird how people just accept that narrative as well? Nobody thinks it's weird that 5 cops backspaced themselves because of a protest. And in case haven't been paying attention, there's been protests on government buildings, local and the federal level, forever. So it is kind of weird that 5 cops took themselves off this mortal coil, and they go, well, 6 passed. Yeah, 1 died of a stroke. Strokes and heart attacks can happen at all times. That wasn't anyone's fault. That's just random. Random happens. But it's almost kind of as if there was a narrative that the left wing needed to push, like they needed to get the body count higher, one way or another. But the author is as suspicious of that as they are about the Epstein stuff. That is to say, they know what's good for them, so they're not very suspicious about the Epstein stuff. The other people who passed away were deleted by the cops. Some were beat to death, and one was blasted. The only one, in fact, she was standing next to 2 other cops, and this guy, I don't know, Secret Service or Capitol Police or something, he fires through a doorway, and he's the only one who even has his Liberty device out. And the victim is standing in a crowd of people, and there's a cop standing right next to her. And this guy fires blind through a doorway. And the funny thing is, the Biden's administration had to give him to advance him to the next, advance his career a little bit. Because if they didn't, it would kind of be an admission that he screwed up. It's like, but you did. You fired into a crowd of people. And there was like a cop right there. You didn't see what you're firing at. You didn't see what your backdrop at. None of this makes sense. Instead, they advanced him from, I don't know, whatever the police positions are, like from a corporal to a lieutenant or something. It's like this. He should have been quietly retired. It's like, well, there's no way to quietly retire him because the media would be all over it. But someone who's that dangerous it's insane that he got advanced, but they had no choice. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys on the next episode.